of other people leads us to a fourth distortion, the chronocentric illusion. The belief that our own relationship to time is the best or only frame of reference, or that it's more important and more real than any other. My grandparents used to tell me about how when they were kids, they didn't have television. And I always thought that sounded so weird. I mean, obviously, I knew it was true, but what the heck did they do with their free time? It wasn't relatable at all. People back then must have been so different, not real in the same way I was. But I remember a time before the internet, before mobile phones, and it wasn't that weird. The internet and cell phones are still, in my mind, an additional thing we now have. But for my daughter, they will be what we've always had. And when I tell her about a time when no one had the internet and didn't even know they needed it, it will likely sound to her just like the old stories I heard about growing up with no TV. And that's bizarre. My grandparents' childhood was weird. It was the olden days. Mine was totally normal. Protagonist syndrome is the belief that you are the main character of the universe. Recognizing that you aren't is what John Koenig famously called Sonder, the realization that other people, like that stranger over there you will never see again, have full lives, just as important and consuming to them as yours is to you. I'd like to add to protagonist syndrome the concept of ab ovo syndrome. Ab ovo means from the egg, from the very beginning. In literature, it describes a story that begins at the start, ab ovo, as opposed to in the middle, in medias res. Ab ovo syndrome is the belief that the movie of the universe began when you began, that the times of your life are the plot and contain the climax, and that everything before you was just backstory, everything after merely sequels. When you realize that that's not true, that you were not born ab ovo, but in medias res, that you'll die before the credits, and that everyone who has ever lived was a fully fleshed out protagonist in their own minds, that feeling is what I call chronosonder. Sonder not just for people over there, but for people over then. Overcoming the chronocentric illusion isn't always easy. It doesn't help that people from the past are finished. Unlike us who still have choices to make, they tell the same story over and over again. They're also separated by barriers made of their own evidence. The world wasn't actually black and white in the past, and it didn't suddenly become vertical in the present. Obviously, we all know that, but the arbitrary technical properties of a time's recording media can influence our perception of the past nonetheless. If silent films didn't look so much different from what could be done just a few decades later, would it be nearly as surprising to learn that Charlie Chaplin lived long enough to watch Star Wars? When I was in high school, I saw 2001's Pipe Dream for the first time, and it blew my mind. My friends and I honestly believed that it was a real thing someone had built. But recently, I looked it up on YouTube, and I was like, this is clearly a computer animation. What the heck was wrong with us? And what do you know? The top comment was exactly that sentiment. Our perception of the past is constantly evolving as technology does. And that's significant. We don't just think about the past, we also think about the past. The material properties of an artifact can influence our relationship with what came before and push it further away. Faded yellowy color, sepia, SD pixelated video. Technological features can make the past seem like it was never as real as the present. But some kinds of evidence collapse that chronocentric divide. One way they can do it right now is by being demotic, ordinary, personal, candid. Such recordings are much more similar to the media we exchange with each other right now in the present. This footage of people goofing around in a 7-Eleven in 1987 has more than 6 million views, not just because of nostalgia, but because it's like visiting past people in their natural habitat at a time zoo. This isn't some pageant with timeless ambitions, it's a view out the window of a time machine they don't know is there. Another way evidence can corrode chronocentric illusions is by containing a convention more normal than we expect. People in old photos look like serious robots because back then you had to stay in the same pose for a long time to get a picture taken. But also, a long-standing trope in the world of images up to that point was that smiling or looking goofy wasn't a sign of happiness, but of drunkenness or stupidity. But every so often, this image pops up online and people vehemently debate whether it's actually old or not. Sure, it's black and white, but the expression seems too normal to really be on a person from the past. It is, however, actually an honest-to-gosh picture taken in the early 1900s, one of the earliest known photographs of a human smiling, in fact. The juxtaposition of an expression someone today might make with a medium that suggests a technology of the past creates an opportunity for chronosonder. The subject is both dead and undead, gone, but not as unrelatably far as we may have thought the past was. Finally, the chronocentric divide can fade when we find the past captured in a medium that was rare at the time but more common now. This is footage taken by an early HD camera of New York City in 1993. It's pretty cool, but there's something almost uncanny about it. Watching it isn't exactly like time traveling back to 1993, but it looks more like video taken today than many of us expect. It's like peering through a telescope. We can see them, but they can't see us. They appear closer, more actual than usual. We lean in to get grasps of what it was like. That's part of the allure of time travel. As L.P. Hartley said, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. But it hasn't always been that way. Time travel wasn't a common feature of fiction until the 19th century. Not because people hadn't thought of it before, they had, but the past and future weren't rich with interesting destinations in the same way they are to us now. In the year 1008, it wasn't an insult to call someone 1000 and late. 1,000 years ago, the culture and technology around you was unlikely to be foreign to your parents, or grandparents, or great-grandparents, and outside of an act of God or gods, you didn't expect them to be foreign to your children or their children either. 1,000 years ago, there were no 80s parties because the 980s weren't interestingly different. Pre-modern societies viewed the present as a continuation of the past. Changes were interpreted as temporary disturbances of the natural state. But today, we see the present as something special. Change is significant enough and rapid enough now that we would imagine ourselves quite differently had we been born 10 years earlier or later. Zachary Sayre Schiffman points out, we fail to realize that people before the 18th century did not see themselves this way. Instead of having a history, they regarded themselves as having an unchanging nature or essence, whose full realization might be impeded or impelled, but not otherwise shaped by events. Nostalgia existed, but for moments and places gone simply because they were prior to or away from here and now, not because they were fundamentally different and categorically irretrievable. As the discovery of antiquities and new worlds and new species accelerated, as the invention of new technologies and new ways of recording accelerated, the present became less and less like the past. Reinhard Koselleck has argued that between 1750 and 1850, the acceleration of history reached a speed at which static or cyclical views of time had to be replaced with our modern view, which understands the past to be essentially different from the present. It used to be that things passed. Now, there is a past. As technological and social change accelerate, the window of time within which things can be trusted to remain stable shrinks. In such a world, to stand still is scary. Hartmut Rosa observed, the pre-modern experience of being excluded is replaced in modernity by the constantly present, fear-inducing possibility of becoming excluded, in the sense of getting left behind. Things change faster, and we keep keeping up because we are afraid to die. Whoever lives twice as fast can realize twice as many worldly possibilities, and thus, as it were, live two lives in the span of one. whoever becomes infinitely fast no longer needs to fear death, the annihilator of options. Acceleration becomes a secular substitute for eternity. To achieve this salvation, we try to make things faster and easier to save time. But one of the greatest hoodwinks we ever pulled on ourselves was not noticing that the things we do to save time leave us with less of it and more alone in it. No technological change is only technological. The car allowed people to travel more quickly and whenever they wanted, but once available, it meant people could live further from where they worked. So cities and towns changed, personal associations changed, roads divided neighborhoods, created new opportunities, while ending others. Jobs and industries and cultural forms of expression and a whole different society sprang into existence simply because we found a way to move faster. Likewise, smartphones and the internet made information access and communication easier and faster, but that's not all they did. Along with them came new social conventions, new communities, new levels of exposure to ideas and conflict, a new understanding of what it meant to be available. That's a lot to have to adapt to. They even redefined what now is made of. Digital spaces are filled with not just what's being said, but also what has been said. And it's all right there, not tucked into a library across town or on a tiny plaque on a statue covered in bird poop. It's in our hands and outside of time. Things used to acquire signs of age, veneers that tucked them appropriately into their place in time. Now, they're automatically updated to always look like now. Digital spaces are so packed with timeless messages between bygone people that we don't even ask, "Is anyone here?" anymore. Instead, we ask, "Is anyone now?" In order to adapt to all of this, we have to consume information in an increasingly dehumanized, decontextualized, and desensualized way. Each next bit is often unrelated to the last. Our participation is not acknowledged or assumed, and it's all fed to us by machines we don't know and didn't build that only put it in our eyes and ears. The sheer weight of all of this accreting information and its growing accessibility is awe-inspiring. It may even be our purpose. I mean, what else produces such detailed records? Purposefully or not, we record, save, collect, organize, and preserve events like nothing else in the universe. I've said before that if humans were to go extinct, the sun would still shine, the universe would keep expanding, Jupiter would continue being gassy, but the universe would lose its best autobiographer. But the technologies of this project have yet to address our bodies. Enter the TV paradox. Remember the short-long and long-short patterns of time? Well, a new pattern has been emerging and growing in frequency. Short-short. It was first observed in people watching TV alone. They reported feeling like time flew by quickly. Oh, wow, have I really been watching for 4 hours? But later, they didn't remember their TV session as a major moment of significant import or duration. They didn't attend to the passing of time during it. They didn't feel bored or like time dragged, but they also didn't accumulate a lot of new, significant, memory-worthy experiences. Rapid, stimulating streams of experience provide a fullness that makes time fly by, but fractured, desensualized, one-way experiences feel unconnected to ourselves and our larger life histories. Retrospectively, they don't fill up a lot of space. They burn our time on both ends. It feels shorter during and after. Interestingly, short has not been found when people engage with content they have connections with. For example, things they own memorabilia of, made friendships through, attended conventions about. So the pace of life may be taking your life from you, but standing could give you your life back. In the future, we will surely find other ways to overcome the negative side effects of the faster experiences we crave. The development of digital media that engage the other senses, more linked as they are with long-term memory, or that build contexts for us could help. So could surgical solutions, like removing the parts of the brain that make us not like doom scrolling. Probably first, any anxieties will be recognized as a condition treatable with medication. Now, this is all to say that we live in a transitional period. The conquest of space made the world smaller, and now the conquest of time has made our lives smaller. We live after the conquering of time, but before its resurrection. In the meantime, make some time for time to control you. Be bored, miss out, fall behind, feel time passing. Lose track of time while experiencing only what your body can alone. You might not have the time of your life, but you'll have more time of your life. I'll see you next time. And as always,